You also talk about the walled garden concept quite a bit. You think you mentioned it earlier in our conversation before we started recording. How does that relate to all of this?
Yeah, so...
And can you define it too for those uninitiated?
So walled garden is what when I'm referring to this, and I don't know like how colloquial this is, but how I'm thinking about it is Web 1.0 was the open internet, where a lot of time people were self-serving or self-hosting. You can access anything just through a browser. Like the browser is like kind of like this beautiful little UX to travel through this third reality. And then during Web 2.0, what they did is they went and consolidated people's information and internet experience into these various web-based apps and then app-based apps.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sign up, you sign that terms of service. What you're actually doing is you're getting rid of ownership of your content. You're giving ownership over to them, but they have the eyeballs, so it makes it worth it, and they can promote you. And if you play their games, then you get famous. But I think what that is doing is it's giving people, especially people born into Web 2.0, a false sense of the capabilities of what the internet is. And I think a lot of the promise of a Web 3 and Web 3.0, if you consider that crypto, a lot of people have moved that into a different term, maybe like quantum computing and other stuff, but is you can go back to this like decentralized version of the internet where people are relaying to the internet and the media of the internet more as the product. The other problem with the walled gardens is it really went on this model of first to free, because it was just about getting as many people on the app as possible and then figuring out how to monetize later. And they thought, okay, and if like an elegant business model is advertising, so let's just go with that because it was the status quo. And so in that instance, you immediately became the product. And, this is like explicitly written out in a book called like What Would Google Do? And it's all about how to become a platform and first to free and how you have to be free. And like, because you're making the people the product. And I think that if we can break down those walls and have people own their data a lot more and also pay for media, even in a very, very fun way, we will have and giving people also the technological tools and understanding in order to scrub the web, to actually be able to engage with the internet, know how to be safe on it outside of these walled gardens. Because what they promised is what any wall promises. They promise safety, security, and ease, right? And what do you give up with that? Freedom.
Yeah.
And I think that it's been like a really sad thing to happen in our psychological development as a culture that we decided to enter into these walled gardens versus taking the risk of venturing into the world. And I think it's really heading a direction that nobody wants it to, where we are just continualizing, productizing ourselves. And when people have all these fears and dystopian understandings of AI and the future and the Matrix and blah, 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 blah. It's funny because we're walking straight into that. Because as long as AI thinks that we're the product, if we're just there to sell our energy, to sell our attention to the mother brain, we will. And so I do think it's an existential problem at some level, like at a massive level, as we continue to interact with technology. Is technology going to be the tool that we use, or are we going to be the tool that technology uses? And the entire business model of the internet right now is set up for technology to be the tool that uses us, for AI to be the tool that uses us. Because as long as we keep being the product, like that's how we end up being the little babies in the Matrix and cells where they just are harvesting our energy.
I was going to ask you, what do you think of ChatGPT?
I think it's super fun. I really enjoy it. I see a ton of use cases for it. It helps me edit things. It helps me ideate. It helps me push back. My skill is a lot more, especially from a writing perspective, on responding and editing my own writing than it is on writing. Like even with my EA, what I do is I verbalize all of my thoughts and she'll write it down, and then I go through and then I can edit it super well. And that's just what works a lot better for me.
Yeah.
That being said, like it's super wrong a lot, like hilariously wrong. I wanted to pull up a real quote from a book called Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And in the book, they talk about where the word propaganda originated from. And it was from the 16th century. And it was the Catholic Church. They had a department, which was basically I don't know how to say it in Italian, but it was basically like the propaganda, like it was the propaganda department of the faith. So like it was their job to go into the new world and to propagize the faith. And they couldn't pull up the quote, and it's like, oh no, that's not where it comes from. And then I had to literally get the book, pull it out, write the quote, and like, oh, sorry, yes, that is where it comes from. And I was like, okay, so there's so many little things that they get wrong. But I think it'll get increasingly right. But in the short term, my biggest fear is that people are going to take what they read as, it's kind of like when you Google something, you get the first answer, and that's just like an SEO based answer. It's not like
therefore it must be true because Google highlighted it.
And people this happened, like 2 lawyers got disbarred recently because they did a court case all off of ChatGPT. And they made up cases that had never happened. They submitted it, and it was like, oh, that's irresponsible.
Did they know they were making up cases?
No, they didn't know.
ChatGPT.
They thought they were real.
This is like a meme.
They didn't know it was real. Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, and so they got disbarred.
Wow.
And I just would caution people, as it gets better. And also, again, back to the Plato thing, like, this is not a tool for remembering. This is not a tool for thinking. This is a tool for having been forgotten. And I would challenge you to leverage it as an incredibly powerful tool to make your life better, but not to let the tool use you.